Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from ejsllc.com. This video is another in my practice session series for the Red Hat Certified Specialist in Containers exam EX188. Before I dive in, I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who's watching, if you haven't subscribed yet, to click the subscribe button. And if you enjoy the video, make sure you click like. As a reminder, these are practice sessions which I'm going through whatever the objectives are for said video and trying to explain them and describe either the meaning of them or their intended function, and do some examples of the objectives as a way of self-assessing if I'm ready for the exam or not. My exam is actually 2 weeks from tomorrow. And this gives me time, if I don't feel confident talking about the objective and doing examples I can do some brushing up before the exam. These are not tutorials and they're not intended to be training materials, but if you are also preparing for the EX188 exam, you might find how I approach my practice useful in your own practice. You might get some strategies out of it. One thing to keep in mind is I don't think this is tied to a particular version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, unlike the R8CSA exam and R8CE, but I think this is actually going to be on RHEL 8. I'm practicing this on RHEL 8. So these videos are being made in February of 2024. So if you are, working on the EX188 in the future, if that exam still exists and you happen upon my video and see some practice ideas, note that the EX188 of the future is probably going to be very different than the EX188 of today. So just something to keep in mind. So for this video, we are still in the implement images using Podman section, and I'm going to discuss the understand when and how to expose ports from a container file. So let me go ahead and open a terminal. I'm going to explain a couple of things before we actually get started. So this idea of exposing ports, this was something that it took me a little bit of time to kind of wrap my head around, especially coming from my system administration background and also some background in network administration. A lot of the Podman stuff is more geared toward your developers because, you're developing your applications, you're containerizing them and such. On the sysadmin side, we are often, or at least in my experience, your experience may and probably will vary, but we are not necessarily in the container building business. We are in the, all right, is it running? Can the users get to it? On and on and on. So when I think of exposing a port, I think of a couple different things. One is, all right, so I have a host-based firewall on my RHEL system, net filter that's running, and I'm managing it either with NF tables or with firewall D doing the NF tables for me. And if I want to expose a port, then I will instruct NF tables, all right, allow traffic on port 80 or whatever. From the server application perspective, if I'm wanting Apache or Nginx to listen on a particular port, whether it's 80 or whatever, there's going to be a directive in the configuration file for listen 80, listen 8080, whatever it is that you want. So that way, when you run the Apache application and run the Nginx application, that application, if you do SSTULPN, it is listening on whatever port you've told it to. And then you have your host firewall, you've exposed your system to, you've exposed that port on your system to allow the traffic to it. In the context of building container images, this seems to be a bit different. The exposing of ports in this context is about the metadata for your container image and by extension the container itself when it's running. It is having the expose information in that is telling you, hey, this container you should expect to be allowing traffic on whatever these ports are that we have dictated to be exposed. That does not actually expose the port from the system administration perspective of make the container listen on this port and allow traffic through a firewall on this particular port. It's informational, telling you that if you run this image, then these are ports that you would expect to I hate using the word in its definition, but expect to expose if you were a system administrator. There's probably a better reason why the word expose was chosen. That might be something I'll take some time to research between now and the exam. I understand the function of it, but it's kind of nice to know the history and the context. The other aspect of working with ports is publishing them. And this is more akin to what we think of as getting the application to run on a port in the system administration perspective. So with all that said, let me do a bit of a demonstration here. Breaking my struck and white rule 13, omit needless words, right? Let's actually search for an HTTPD image. Maybe when I'm done with all my preparation, I'll have the fully qualified image names memorized. We'll do the UBI 8 since I'm sticking with Rel 8 for a lot of this stuff. And let's just go and pull down that image, and then we'll start doing inspections and such. So that'll take a moment or so. And by the way, if you have a good explanation of why the word expose was chosen for putting the metadata about potential ports to use for an image, feel free to put that in the comments. I'm sure anyone that would be watching this would like to get a better explanation of it than what I am talking about with the practice session. So if I were to inspect this image, I think I can just see it within config. If not, we'll look at all of it. From previous video, here's entry point and CMD. It's kind of an interesting way to do that. So expose ports 8080 and 8443. When this image was built, at some point there was a directive for expose, and these ports were included in that instruction. And so what this tells us from the consumer of the image perspective, that we would be having traffic needing to, or rather this image would be able to accept traffic on 8080 and 8443. That does not actually make the image do it, but it would be a reasonable assumption if you're inspecting this to say, hey, this image, this container will be accepting traffic there. Just make me a container. Let me do it in the background. We'll have it blow away when it's done. Maybe if I give Podman an actual instruction, it'll know what to do, and I can do my tab completion. So we have this running here, this elastic Mendel. It would be listening on its ports. Let me do, let's inspect this particular image, and we'll see here the ports that it is exposing is 8080 and 8443. Now there's a null here, and the reason is that is not published to the outside world. Now within the network, if I do Podman network ls, there's the default Podman network. If I were to have multiple servers on this, let's say I have a database server. Let's say this web server container is running WordPress or something that would need to talk to a database server, and I have another container that is the database server. Now I'm not getting into DNS and such. Some of you are probably raising the red flag about me talking about the default network, but if the database server were to try to curl the index page from this web server on that port, it should work, because it's actually exposed on the container, but the outside world can't get to it. If I wanted to do this for the outside world, then I would have to publish the port. So let me do podman run -drm, and we learn from inspecting the container it's accepting traffic on 8080 and 8443. I'm just going to do 8080. What this syntax is telling me is I am mapping 8080 on my host system, which is this VM that I'm running Podman from, and that's going to send traffic to 8080 on the container, which we know from the image inspection it should be expecting traffic there. I understand why it's not tab completing. Single dash for detached mode. I think I'll probably do -- detach if I wanted to. It's curious some of the options you learn in the muscle memory with it. All right. And if I were to go back to my browser and just go to localhost 8080, we get the default Apache page. So the mechanism there, again, the exposing of the port is telling is providing metadata saying, hey, this port would be something that this container is going to accept traffic from, and the publishing is the actual making it available to the outside world. And by outside world, I'm talking about the container host. And then if you have something like OpenShift and such, there's other layers that you can truly get it to the outside world, outside of your container host. Now, to do this from your container file, this is how this would probably look. So let me do, we're actually going to build our own, or I'm going to try to build my own Apache container. Or maybe we'll try Nginx. I'll do Nginx. Let me Podman pull, now let me Podman search the universal base image. Network's being a little slow tonight. Oh yeah, I got an email that T-Mobile Home Internet was doing some maintenance, so maybe I'm in that window right now. Where's my UBI8? There it is. All right, so from this image we are going to run DNF install -y Nginx. I can't remember what the executable is off the top of my head. I have to look that up. Or better yet, we'll see what it would be within the container itself. So we'll just start with this. I guess we can go ahead and put the expose statement. So let's say expose 8080 TCP. Actually, if we just do 8080, I think by default it will add the TCP, but you can do that. We'll experiment. I'm not sure if I need to do 2 expose statements or not, but let's just add 8443 TCP as well. And we'll see what happens with the container image. So Podman build, call it web test. And this will take a minute because it'll need to download and install Nginx. All right, so it didn't complain, so that's probably a true statement about having the multiple exposed things, but let's inspect our image real quick. So this is web test, and we'll just look at the config section. And, actually, I guess it read it as is. I would expect that to be 2, so I guess I have to either have it space delimited or do another expose instruction. But one thing to keep in mind here is first of all, this container is not actually going to run Nginx, nor have I configured Nginx to actually be listening on 8080. So this is just the metadata. But again, it would be a reasonable assumption that your container is going to be actually listening on these ports, because it wouldn't make sense to include that metadata if you're not making your container do that thing. So I am going to run IT, and we will do web tests because I'm curious to see. Oh, yeah, I'm going to have to fix that before I go on. Well, we're in an experimenting mood. We'll see if it will accept that or not. Let's use the same name of the container. Okay, so yeah, you actually can do space delimited there rather than having to do and I guess that would be good, because otherwise it would technically have to make another layer for the other expose command. So let's try running our container again. So we're actually in the container that -it is interactive, and or I is interactive. T, I think, is like making a TTY for you to be able to do some things. So Nginx. There we go. All right, so I want to do Nginx. I think probably just Nginx. Listen to 80. I would need to get that to be 8080. This is going to get a bit out of the scope of what I'm wanting to do, but we'll see if I can build this and make it work the way that I want. All right, so we'll exit out of this, and let's see. I'll do the Podman way of getting that file. So I can do, first of all, let's go back to our container file, and we're going to add an entry point of Nginx. That should just start the process. Probably start an exit though. maybe I should have done HTTPD. Basically, what I was going to try to do is make this last and listen on port 8080. I'll see if I can get it done. If this takes too long, I might stop. All right, so we got that. Let's build this as web test 2. Again, I have to tell Podman what to do. All right, that didn't take long. So let's do podman run -d rm and call it web1 web test 2. Oh, I see. It just stopped, and that's why it removed itself. So there was some type of error. Let's see if we can get what the error is. Oh, it just exited. Yeah, it didn't stay in the foreground. So I don't think I'm going to try to build this little image. I really think that's probably going to be outside of the exam where it wants you to build the application itself. I may be wrong, and that might cost me my exam. But oh well. Conceptually, I understand what's going on as far as the expose and what it's doing for the metadata, and the fact that you have to publish the port to be able to access it. So I think for the actual objective, I understand what needs to go on. So I'm not going to belabor the point. If you found this video useful, even maybe the ending stuff when you're trying to decide if you want to try to build your own container image, do click like. And I also want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video and encourage you to click the subscribe button and ring the bell if you have not subscribed yet. That way you know when new content comes available. Thank you for your time, and as always, I will see you the next time.